Making sure we've got all the board members here. Terry, are you here and can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Rusty?
Yes, sir.
Bo?
Yep, I'm here, Randy.
Kurt?
Yes.
Thank you. Joanne?
Yes.
Celeste? So I guess we're still waiting for Celeste, but we probably should get started. So anyway, welcome to this special meeting of the Board of Education. Board members are present today along with Superintendent Beelang and members of his administrative team. Gary Gashensky is here from Perspectives Consulting Group to provide the community and the board with the results of the elementary community survey. So our plan today is to review the results of the survey with Gary, hold our questions to the end of his presentation, and then have some discussion about where we want to go next. And with that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Beelang.
Thanks, Randy, and welcome everybody to this interesting format. This is our first time through for everyone, so we please appreciate your patience and understanding if things don't go just exactly as planned, but we've made a few run-throughs and hope we have this right. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Gary Gashensky from Perspectives Incorporated. Gary was responsible for putting together the survey and administrating the survey under pretty much unusual circumstances as well. And he joins us remotely from his studio in a beautiful Almena Township. So Gary Gashensky, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you to talk about the results of the elementary community survey. And I'm going to share some slides with you here that'll help you to understand what we're covering today. I want to start by sharing with you an overview of the survey. The survey was a 23-question survey, and it was conducted both online and by mail. And when we talk about by mail, there were printed copies of the survey available, and people could request that they have a copy mailed to them or pick it up at the administration offices, and they could mail it back in. So we got replies to the survey both by online and by mail. The survey window, when we had the survey out in the field, we asked people to respond to it between March 16th and March 27th. And, you know, it's really important to maybe think back to that time. It seems like it was forever and a day ago, but on March 23rd, which would be the beginning of the second week of the survey window, is when the stay-at-home order came down from the governor. So the first week was the last week of perhaps normality as we know it, and now the second week was the week of stay-at-home. Interestingly, when we look at survey results, and we've done enough surveys to know that typically in the second week of the survey, we don't get as many responses, but this year we did. So I'm going to say that perhaps the stay-at-home contributed to the response rate that you got. The other thing is that we limited the survey only to those residents who lived in Portage Public School District and were age 18 and over. So if they weren't in those categories, they did not complete the survey. So everyone that did the survey was 18 years and older and a resident of Portage Public Schools. We got a total of 1,350 surveys back. So when we look at that as in a statistical sense, that would give us a margin of error of plus or minus 2.7%. And, you know, you're used to seeing these margins of errors when you look at things on TV, political polls, the results, you'll hear them on the news. And so in this case, 2.7 is a really good response rate because 1,350 surveys gives us enough surveys to have that level of confidence in the results. And so you'll see perhaps in several spots I'll mention within the margin of error, I'm referring to the plus or minus 2.7%. Interestingly, when we look at the responses that were received, we asked people for their age, we asked people for what school they live closest to. And when we looked at demographics like that, the school they live closest to was interesting because we got an awful lot of responses from respondents who lived near Central Elementary, Central Middle School, and Portage Central High School. In fact, so much so that we got, if you looked at the percentage of households in Portage Public Schools, you wouldn't have expected as many as we got. We got twice as many as we would have expected from that area. In order to make sure that the results were balanced across the entire district, we weighted the results. So effectively, we made those results fit within what we would have expected in terms of the number of households in that area. So we've weighted those results. So when you look at the report results, and what you see in the report, you're going to see that we're using that weighted data that reflects that we got more than what we would have expected from Central, and we balanced that to what would have been proportional for the number of households. We issued 2 reports. The first report that we issued was the report that has the general results. This has the results to each of the questions on the survey, all 23 questions. It is a 90-page report, and it includes some comments from residents in it. And when I say some comments, what I'm referring to is that we got an awful lot of comments back when we asked people for their reasons why they felt a certain way on the survey. And we put those comments in a second document called the responses listing. In the responses listing, you will find every comment we received. So every comment to every question is in the responses listing. I would strongly encourage you, trustees, as you look at the results, to not just look at what's in the report document, but to also take the time to read the responses listing. I recognize that it's 163 pages long, which is an awful lot of responses, but I think it's really important for you to appreciate how survey respondents felt about the different issues. You will find me at times referring to the responses listing when I talk to you about the results. So once again, while the report document has examples of the responses in some of the questions, the responses listing has all of the responses, so we split them into the 2 reports. One of the questions that we asked on the survey, and you'll note that I'm not going to cover all the questions in our time together here, and you're welcome to ask me about questions that I don't cover, but one of the questions that I'm going to share with you today is the question is, do the buildings and facilities need to be improved in Portage Public Schools? And you'll see that of the survey respondents who answered the question, we got 55% who said yes, they need to be improved. And then we asked them what needs to be improved. So if you said yes, these buildings and facilities at Portage Public Schools need to be improved, then we asked you what needed to be improved. Elementary schools was 97%. So in other words, nearly every respondent who said the buildings and facilities need to be improved said that they felt that the elementary schools need to be improved. Nothing else even came close to that. Everything else was fractional numbers, 3, 5, 7%. But elementary schools, 97% of the respondents felt they needed to be improved. Another one of the questions I think is important for our understanding today of the survey results is the question of, do you feel Portage Public Schools are fiscally responsible? And you had yes, no, and unsure is your 3 choices. And you'll see that about 44% of residents said that they felt that Portage Public Schools were fiscally responsible. 35% were unsure, and 20% said no, they were not fiscally responsible. And what's really important then is to find out why they felt that way. So if you said you were unsure, or if you said no, you didn't feel Portage Public Schools were fiscally responsible, we asked you why. And there's 2 themes that show up several times. These are not the only ones. I would encourage you once again to read the responses listing. But the 2 that seem to show up more repeatedly are, 1, that the bond request is too close to the last request. So people are talking about the timing. Why are we asking now? We just asked a couple of years ago. So they're concerned about the timing of the request. The other reason why people said they were concerned about the fiscal responsibility, either said you weren't fiscally responsible or unsure, as they brought up the issue of 2 stadiums were unnecessary. So when you read the report, you will see comments where they are making the point that, you know, if we needed to do elementary schools, why did we spend money on stadiums? That's essentially the point that residents are making. So I would encourage you to look at the responses in the listing for this question, but these themes showed up several times. There are 2 questions that really go to the heart of the matter. And the first one was, how do you feel about the plan for addressing the district's elementary school facility needs? And we gave 3 choices. We said, do you feel it's acceptable, unacceptable, or not acceptable, and unsure? And 39% said the plan was acceptable, 45 did not feel it was acceptable, and 14% were unsure. And so this is really important to look at in the same way that we looked at the previous question, which is, if somebody said it's not acceptable, what were their concerns about the plan? And understand, before I show you the concerns, we did give them a description of the plan that included, what has changed with the elementary schools, the history of the elementary schools, that a committee was formed to study the elementary schools and the process that was used there. And we outlined that. The concerns that they had about the plan fell into basically 4 categories. The first one is that a number of survey respondents were concerned about the idea of building new versus renovating or remodeling buildings. There are a lot of survey respondents who just basically said, we can do this less expensively, or we can do this more effectively if we renovate rather than build new. The second of the reasons why they did not support the plan or were unsure about the plan dealt with the central elementary location. And they were really concerned about the potential to put it on the parcel property on South Westnedge. There was a lot of concern about that location for a variety of reasons. Once again, all of which are listed within the responses listing. The third reason why people were concerned was the cost. 2 concerns with the cost. The first one was just the total amount. 155 million seemed like an awful lot of money. There was people who questioned that large of a request. The second concern with the cost, as we've indicated before, is the timing. Okay, so we just had this other bond, we're still paying on this other bond, and now you're asking us to pay on this one. And the fourth concern that people had about the plan related to overcrowding. And what we mean by overcrowding is that there are people who looked at the plan and basically said, well, if there are elementary schools that are already at or over capacity, then we should be looking at putting enough capacity in that they won't be at or over capacity again anytime soon. And when we use the word overcrowding to describe it, what they're basically saying, not enough was done to maybe make enough capacity for students within the district. They thought there should be either larger schools or more capacity. So when we look at those 4 reasons, those are the reasons why people didn't support the plan. The sister question on the survey is, okay, we're going to ask you now about the bond request. Would you vote to approve a 25-year bond to pay for renovating Mooresbridge Elementary, building 5 new elementary schools, updating technology, purchasing new buses, and addressing facility needs for curious kids in community high school? Once again, they had a description prior to this question that included how much they would pay based on the market value of their house and how much they would pay per year based on the taxable value of their house. And they were provided that information prior to this question. You'll see that 45% basically said yes, they would support the plan. 37% said no, and 16% were unsure if they would support the plan. Interestingly, and very important for our understanding here is that this really doesn't differ across demographic groups. So for example, you could say to me, Gary, do older residents, maybe retirees, are they less approving of it? Are they more concerned about it? Or are younger residents more likely to approve it? No. Across age groups, this percentage basically holds up. It varies by a percent or 2, but within the margin of error. If you said to me, Gary, does it differ by what school they live closest to? It doesn't. It's the same across all the schools in the district. There's only one school where it differed, and that's Woodland Elementary. Residents who live near Woodland actually were more likely to vote for it. Everywhere else, basically all the same. If we ask if you were a parent versus not a parent of a student attending, once again, all the same. So when I look at this result doesn't differ by any measurable demographic category, except in the rare instance of the Woodland Elementary difference. The reasons why people will not vote for this are the same reasons we saw for the plan. Now, admittedly, when we ask the question why you didn't approve the plan and why you won't vote for the bond, there are similar questions, and we have similar results. You'll see building new versus renovating, central elementary location, the cost, and the overcrowding. My counsel to you on this is simple, and that is that these concerns really are universal. They are whether they're for the plan or for the bond. There isn't anything specific to the bond request that is more concerning than there was for the plan. It's the same issues across both of those topics. We then asked people who said, okay, I will not support the bond request. And you'll remember that's about 37% of the people who took the survey, and those who were unsure, which was another 16%. So basically about 53%. We said to those folks, would you support a less expensive option? So of the people who said they wouldn't support the bond or they were unsure, you had about 1/3 of them who said they would not, or they would be willing to support a less expensive option. Reason to go look at the responses listing in this question is because we did ask them, what would they support? And within the report, you're going to see a variety of answers. I wish I could tell you that they all agreed on what the amount is that they would support and what they thought it would be that they would support. But this is where I think it's really important to read those responses, because you'll see what they are interested in supporting and how much they're willing to pay. I will tell you there is not necessarily a consensus on either one of those topics. We then asked if they had sufficient information to be able to vote on the bond for elementary facilities. And you will see here that on this question, we had about 61% of our survey respondents said, yes, I have sufficient information to feel comfortable voting on this. We had about 26% who said no and 12% who were unsure. So basically, at this point of taking the survey, there was almost 2/3 of the people who felt they knew enough information to be able to answer the question about whether or not they would vote for the bond. But if they didn't have enough information, the number one thing they wanted to know was the central elementary location. And almost very explicitly, are you going to build it on the parcel of property on South Westnedge, or are you going to build it somewhere else, perhaps in the locale of its current location? They want that to be very specific as to where it's going to be. They also wanted to know more plan details. One of the big plan details they wanted to know was, in what order are you going to do the schools, and how much is it going to cost per school to do them? You'll see that in the report mentioned several times. Another bit of information they want to know is the cost. They would like a breakdown of costs. They would like it to be more specific, perhaps by school, for example. They also want to know about the other options. There are survey respondents who recognize that through this process, a variety of options have been generated, and they'd like to know about some of the other options. In particular, lower cost options were an interest of the survey respondents. And finally, they want to know about swing schools. This was especially a concern for parents. They wanted to know where their children were going to be during the time that their school was being rebuilt. So there was some concerns and some information desired about, can we understand when our school would be done and where our children would be while our school was being done. I haven't covered all the questions in the report. There are 23, but I do want to summarize the ones that I covered for you today, and then I'll be happy to take your questions and entertain your discussion. First things first, we had 1,350 respondents participate in the survey. I want to thank everyone who took the time to participate, and I especially want to thank the Portage Public Schools staff for really doing a nice job of promoting the survey, not only with a postcard mailing, but online and in other forms of communication. As you recall, 55% of the people surveyed did feel the buildings and facilities needed to be improved. Once again, 97% of those people thought elementary schools needed to be improved. We had about 39% who felt the plan was acceptable. That leaves over half who didn't think it was acceptable or unsure, and we understand what some of those concerns are. We had 45%, or just less than half, vote to approve the bond in terms of how they would vote right now on that survey question. And finally, 61% have sufficient information to vote on the bond at this time. Once again, I've taken a high-level overview of about 6 of the questions on the survey. There are other questions. I would certainly entertain your questions and discussion, as it would be helpful to you to understand what we learned from the survey.
Gary, can you see the screen to see us if our hands are held up? Because I think Randy's only in this conference on phone.
No, I can see you, Joanne.
Great.
So does anybody, Joanne, do you have questions for Gary?
Thank you. Gary, I look at the the geographic location of the peoples that respond. And the original number was 30% from, and this is the problem, Central Elementary, Central Middle, Central High School. And that was 405 people out of 1350. You scaled that down to 14%. So you weighted the survey. I appreciate that the 6 elementaries that are pure elementary responses, such as 9.4 from Amberley and 12% from Angling, but you somehow weighted Central Elementary down. If you did this survey again, would you pinpoint it just to Central Elementary? And number 2, I want to clarify that for our people at home, that when we talk about 2 sites of Central Elementary, we're talking about the existing one and the one approximately 1.5 miles down Westnedge near the fabric streets, Capri, Calico. And so that differentiates between that parcel and the existing parcel. So can you explain weighting that survey with such a large amount in the Central Elementary area?
Joanne, when we looked at the number of households around each of the schools, we looked at that collective of 3 schools, Central Elementary, Central Middle School, and Central High School. And we looked at the number of households there. As a percentage within the district, it is not 30%. As you pointed out, the number of surveys that came in, it's significantly less than that. So what we did is we took proportionally the number of households that are there and weighted it to that percentage, which is approximately what you're seeing there. You will note on that chart in the report, there are also some people who were unsure what elementary school they lived closest to or what school they live closest to. And there were some people who were also preferred not to answer the question. And so when you total up the percentages there, we do have to include those couple in the total there. But the approximate percentage by household that lives near Central Elementary, Central Middle School, and Portage Central High School is approximately 15%. It's showing up 14% because we had those extras in the prefer not to answer unsure, but it is proportional to the number of households for all of the schools in the district.
Thank you, Gary.
Does anyone else have any questions for Gary?
Hey, Randy, it's Rusty. I just had a quick question, I guess. I thought it kind of fascinating that roughly 46% would approve the bond as kind of described, and then only 33% would support a less expensive option. Gary, is that just kind of, do those 2 slides kind of conflict? I mean, obviously they are what they are, but it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Rusty, let me try once again to explain the importance of the 33%. The 33% who said they support a less expensive option are the ones who said no, they would not support. So we basically would have to go back to the question that says, okay, do you support the plan or would you support the bond? And the number who wouldn't support the bond, 37% no, 16% unsure. So it's that group of people only who are being asked. We're not asking someone who would approve it.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I missed that. So thank you.
It's helpful in that way, and you'll see the comments related to it within the responses listing.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Kurt Droppers. I have a question about the people that didn't think the 2 stadiums was a necessity. Can you relate whether they came from the central side or the northern side, or is there any way to tell how that all worked out?
Kurt, that's a great question. I can't honestly tell you that we processed it that way. We could certainly go back into the data and split those comments up in that way, but we did not look at that specifically for me to answer that. If you wish, I can report that back to you.
Right. It's not, it doesn't matter, but I was just curious when I saw that data and you had more responses from the central elementary people, whether they're just wondering why the northern side had to have a stadium, because your survey is so weighted to the central side because of their other issues.
Kurt, I would clarify only in this respect that it's weighted proportionally. So the percentage of people we have from Central is proportional to the number of households. So I just want to make that clear. To the extent that when you read the comments, you will note that we have every comment from every Central elementary person in there. So even though we weighted them, we have all their comments. So when you read the comments, it looks like there's so much more from Central. When you look at the percentages, we've scaled those to represent the proportion of households. But I understand.
I get the statistic part, but it just, if you see the same comment every time, then you wonder where they all came from. And Randy, one housekeeping, I don't think you approved the motion as the agenda.
Oh, I don't think we did, Kurt. You're correct. I guess it's too late now.
All right. I was just following along on my handout, you know?
Right.
All right.
I have a comment or a question, if I could make one.
Sure, Terry.
I thought this was all really interesting. I want to comment to Kurt's question. As a part of the overall survey. The overall survey sort of tells me that we have some more education to do of our owners. There seems to be some still lack of understanding about funding and how we fund our academics and operating budget versus buildings and facilities. The people that are asking about the stadium, it's kind of funny to me because the voters voted to pass that 5 years ago, and they seem to be a little bit in the dark about that. So as well as the comments about, we hadn't informed citizens about this whole process, which we have thought we've done a great job communicating about the community meetings and the surveys and all of those things. And I don't know if it's because weather caused us to reschedule a lot of things, or maybe it's just one of those not in my backyard type things that it's not important until it's in your backyard. I don't know, but it just seems like there is a lot of misunderstanding, and there are a lot of issues that maybe we could do a better job informing the public or talking about it, or those kinds of things. The other comment I want to make is I found it interesting, the comments about what schools should be first or what were in the worst shape. Us having gone to all those buildings and seen them and knowing which ones are new and which or newer of those 5 buildings and which are the older. It was interesting to me that the newest school, people were saying it should be first or it's in poor shape. So those are just my comments.
Thanks, Terry. Anyone else?
Yes, Randy. I wonder if these survey takers followed the instruction to look at the educational specs that were below it before they looked at them, because we gave them great information on updating versus replacing. And to answer Kurt's thing on the stadium only, there was approximately 12,500 votes cast for the schools and the stadiums only passed by 56%, and the schools passed by 65%. So you're right, we've got some outdated, as Terry said, customers and taxpayers. And I think if we made a fact list and led them to that document that was attached, recommended for them to look at before they took the survey, we might see a slight swing in responses. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Hey, Randy.
Hello.
Yeah. So Gary, I always love it when you do surveys for us. These are great meetings and great learning opportunities. My question is unfair because it'll cause you to have to go back in your memory 5 or 6 years. But can you remember from the survey that you did on the middle schools? And I'm not sure you worded the questions the same, but I'm just trying to calibrate the survey results that we're looking at now with the survey results we got back then. But can you recall what the support was? And I know we were really trying to suss out the 3 school option versus the 2 school option. But do you have that off the top of your mind? And I guess if you don't, that would kind of be an open question that I would have that I'd like us to just pull out and compare to these.
Oh, it's an unfair question.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You may not be able to answer today.
I can tell you this, Bo. The questions weren't exactly the same because when we did the middle school survey in 2015, we were looking at several different options, including stadiums separately and some other things going on. So the option construction was a little different. You would have found, if you went back and looked at that, Joanne brought up the statistic, the approval of the middle schools part of that. We did have 63% in that study, and the actual vote was 65%. So it was pretty close. The stadiums was also within 3 percentage points of what we saw, but they were different. The one change I will tell you, Bo, just in looking at the results that we have now versus the question that we had in 2015 is the question about fiscal responsibility. In other words, if you look at the fiscally responsible, what we saw this time was 44% of survey respondents said Portage Public Schools are fiscally responsible. That was 70% back in 2015. So in other words, we are 25% lower this time than we were 5 years ago. So that's a significant change. If you would ask me to go back and look for other changes in comparable questions, there are almost none. The ratings for the educational, for the extracurricular, for all of those are nearly identical. The biggest question that has significant swing is fiscal responsibility from 70% say you do to 44.
I'm looking at the survey right now from 15 or whenever it was done. And it says that support for 3 middle schools, pools, and stadiums, the yeses were 55.3%, the noes were 35.5%, and the unsures were 9.3%.
Which, and this is Bo, which is different from the new survey results we're looking at now. And I guess just making an observation of on that fiscal responsibility, then the 2 more granular points that were made from those folks were the 2 stadiums were unnecessary, and then this request is too close to the last one. And yeah, I mean, in my reaction to the 2 stadiums unnecessary, I think, Terry, you brought this up. My reaction there is, well, the community just respectfully disagreed with you 5 years ago. But this other point that this bond request is too close to the last one, that is a forward-thinking, real live question that we don't need a time machine to be able to listen to that one and weigh it. So. Hey, and Randy, this is Bo again. A question for you on process. So would it be premature at this juncture for trustees to weigh in with our initial reactions? Or would you like that to wait and have this just kind of be a learning session and just so we can absorb, the survey results?
No, my plan was to make sure all trustees had their questions answered by Gary, and then I would like to have a discussion about what trustees think the next step ought to be. I think we could have that discussion today, given what we see here. And, we were planning, if we were going to put this on the ballot, our vote for that would be at our next meeting on May 4th. And it would just be very interesting today if we could see what the consensus is of the board members that are at this meeting to see whether we really want to pursue that at this point. So yes, I'm fine having a discussion about where we go next, and specifically is the thinking that we should have this on the agenda for a vote on May 4th to put it on the ballot. Would anyone like to start that discussion?
Hey, well, Randy, it's Rusty. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just think, there's so many unknowns right now, and I think a lot of the public would agree that I think it would be fairly irresponsible for any organization to make a request with what we just don't know what the future holds. Fiscally, everything, we don't know what schools are going to look like next year. We don't know what a lot of this community is going to look like, or other communities. So, I mean, I would be inclined to hold off till a better time and when we have a better chance of what's going on in this world.
Very good. Thanks.
I'll chime in.
Yes.
I would agree with that. And as I said before, I think if we took some time, that would allow us to do a little bit better form of education to people, maybe come up with more detail about the Southwest Niche property, traffic patterns, drainage, the entrance and egress, some of those things that the citizens seem to be worried about. Maybe talk about property values that are properties near school. And also, I'm sure what they have not considered is what we might do with that property if we do not use it for a school. So, those things would be things we could better look into. We can better publicize the idea about renovating versus building, and what building longevities are, and the difference in cost being not significant. A number of those types of things, we could take advantage of this situation to better educate our public.
Thanks,
Randy,
Jerry.
I support
Yes,
the
Jim.
other two comments. I wonder, did you know education, and whether or not Gary has to survey again? The ideal situation of putting a bond on the ballot is to get it approved the first time. And it's obvious to us right now that the public is not ready to address this kind of expense, given the nature of the times that we're in right now, the uncertainty. So great comments. I think waiting, perhaps resurveying, educating, as Terry and Bo say, giving them some access to the 56-page architect's renderings of possibilities could bring us the yes vote that we need when we go the first time.
Thanks, Joanne.
One more thing I want to say. There seem to be a lot of comments about crowding. And we know that were we to go ahead with the bond and it be approved, that there would be redistricting. I'm just wondering if there could or would be some push to alleviate some of this perceived crowding or real crowding ahead of time, so that we could make some of those shifts to take the pressure off some of the buildings that are feeling it. So that's just a comment, additional thing about what we might consider doing now.
But Terry, when you look at the statistics given to us, that this particular year that we're at 97% of capacity, and if we just add, if we turn one of our 450 schools to 600, it seems unbelievable that we can pull that down to 80%. But that doesn't impact classroom sizes. So with the capacity that we're at this year, shifting boundaries is not going to help. And I think Mark is the best response to the boundaries, because he says he gave us some statistics that even if we redistrict and build, the impact would be minor. And Mark, would you like to speak to that?
I'm really not prepared to speak to that right now. I'd be going off of memory, and I would rather not. If that needs to be addressed in the future, I will be happy to pursue that, but I don't have any information in front of me right now. Thank you.
Randy, I'll chime in on the bigger issue, and I don't see with the economy the way it is, we have any choice but to wait.
Yes, sir. Understand.
Hey, Randy, this is Bo. Can I go again?
Sure.
I'm happy to kind of hear where the conversation is going, because that's really where my head was. And the big issue here is the issue that Gary couldn't survey for. I mean, it's just this uncertainty, this economic uncertainty, and those on the board who've been on here the longest, and there are 3 of us who are especially long in the tooth on this. But we went through the 08-09, and kind of the bottom kind of fell out, and it took us until 15 before we kind of built the momentum. And I mean, and at that point, property values fell, and we had to deal with that too. So we kind of regrouped and started the planning, and it was a 5-year process. And I'm not predicting at all what the time length is going to be here. We just don't know, but we kind of carried the momentum. And after 5 years, I mean, the community kind of, the economy had solidified and the community rallied, and we passed it overwhelmingly. So, I mean, that's the first point. The second point I think that we did learn here is this whole issue of this millage compression. And it was just 5 years ago. And, but I think, I mean, we'd have to, and I know the analysis exists, but we'd have to look at it. But, in a few years, we are going to hit a point where we're paying off some of our former bonds. And I think we're doing better on those than maybe the original schedule was. So we are going to hit a magical point here at some point where the stars and the moon are going to line up, and we're going to retire some old. And I mean, there might be a way to make this fit real well. That's the second point. Then the third point is that I think our plan is a good one. But I would say this, if we have more time, I would encourage us to kind of spend more time thinking about, is there a different way we can skin the Central Elementary cat? And I don't know that there is a way, but given more time, there could be. And I just remember what we went through with the 3 middle schools versus the 2. And I just think if we could figure out a different way to go at it, then we wouldn't have one neighborhood who really feels bad about it, or where there's a significant more pushback on it. So I'm not saying there's a better answer there, but if we had more time, we could try to look at other options. So, but I'm with my other colleagues in that, this is not the right time to put on the ballot.
But Bo, as chair of the audit committee, and without much detail, and I can call Kurt into this conversation, we refied, and we have 20 years left on that one bond that was the 155 million at 1.55 mils, and we'll have 25 years to pay that bond off. We've got 20 years left to pay that bond off. The other small bonds from 8 and 10 are gone. Those payments are gone.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'll just make a final comment, then I'll go on mute. I'm just suggesting that we keep an open mind.
Got it. Did Celeste join the meeting? I guess not.
She did.
She
Randy.
did.
He's on.
Oh, she
She
did.
did.
He's muted.
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Celeste.
Yeah, hello there.
Do you have any comments on next steps?
At this point, I'm just trying to put my thoughts together, because right now I think we're at a wait moment, rather than moving forward. And then once we absorb that and wrap our minds around that, I think we can talk about what needs to happen next.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. I tend to agree with all the comments that were made here. I think Gary did an excellent job of pulling together the information we need to make a decision, and there's an awful lot of good information in there that we need to process. Certainly, the economic uncertainty is huge, and that ties right into this bond being too close to the last bond. So I'm in agreement, and I think we have consensus that at this time we're not going to take it forward to the voters. Any other comments with regard to that?
I guess, Randy, it's Rusty here. Sorry. I
Yes,
just
sir.
think I do like waiting a couple years. It looks like we have some more work to do, especially most concerning was the public's faith in our fiscal responsibility. I mean, that's pretty big. I don't know how much control we have over that. I think we all know we're fiscally responsible. I think people drive down I-94 and see those big stadiums, but that's what the public voted for by 55%. But yeah, I think we're fiscally responsible. And if you look at our tax mills, versus other communities in this area, we're not the most expensive, but I think by far we have the nicest facilities for what the tax base is funding.
I feel that we're going to have to survey again. And Randy, I support your statements, and perhaps address a couple of schools first at a smaller millage amount. But we're just guessing right now. I think I leave it to Gary, the professional, to give us some input on a future survey at the end of this pandemic.
Yes, yes.
Randy, Bo here.
Yes, sir, Bo.
Can I make a comment as owner linkage chair? I'm kind of feeling like, I mean, it was widely published in the community that we were on a cadence to head toward, an August vote on this. And it's been a process that's gone, a year and a half, and it's been very involved. I think we should have some kind of communication on kind of the board consensus that we're reaching today. That is, it's kind of a communication to the owner community and not just, to parents. So I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but I just wanted to put that out there. I think the community should know, just the details of today's deliberation. And I mean, there's still uncertainty, but there is wide support, I think, from the board for replacing these elementary schools. But I think we've articulated good, and I'm kind of hearing unanimous rationale to push them off. So anyway, I just wanted to state that to the full board, and just to get that kind of on the record with my colleagues here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I think we can move to our comments and communications section. I believe we have some comments from the public.
Yes, Randy, Michelle Karpinski here from Communications. We do have one communication that was mailed to us or emailed in the time stated. It is from Paul Summers. His address is 9949 Wexford Drive, and this is his statement. Transparency, that is the ask from my family. I recently submitted a list of questions via a letter to the board, which can be found at www.ppsplan.com, that states concerns against 4 key topics of classroom counts, the vacant lot, redistricting, and commitment to the environment. While we support the concept, and that word is in quotes, of 5 new schools, what was conveyed in the survey was not a plan, and current publicly communicated information is limited and does not answer some basic questions. Will the board support having more community dialogue events, or will the closed-door decision-making continue? This is important as it directly affects my children's future as well as the community I love. I'd like to avoid the if we only asked or the had we only known situations that can arise from a project of this size. My family and neighbors want to support a yes to the August bond, but would like transparent discussions to be held in order to gain our support. That's the end of the comments.
Thank you, Michelle. And that's the only one we have?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Since we didn't approve the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, is there anything anyone else would like to bring forward at this time? Okay, then I believe we are adjourned, and we'll see you at our regular meeting at 6:30. Thank you very much.